Welcome to the Razors Inc. podcast with your host, Jonathan Ferriti. Think about 1980, a lifetime ago. A movie released that year captured that distinctive era, punctuated by the fashion and trends of the time. But 44 years after its release, a re-examination of the movie brings up more questions. Pour yourself a drink, pull up a chair, and hear Jonathan's take on movies, television, and today, we'll make an attempt to doctor the script for American Gigolo. Here's your host, Jonathan Ferriti.
I'm going to talk about American Gigolo, released by Paramount in 1980, starring Richard Gere. This was his breakout film after Looking for Mr. Goodbar, starring Lauren Hutton. I saw it upon its release. I was a junior in college, and at that time, it was 1980. We had left the 70s behind us. We were in a new frontier. So when you listen to the Giorgio Moroder score and the Blondie music, it's going to give you a taste of that 80s. And when you look at the story, you look at the cars, you look at the clothes, everything about this is 80s. We've left the 70s behind. It's important to point out that in April of 1980, the first case of AIDS was diagnosed in San Francisco. The hideous disease was not a cloud over this movie, but it was on the horizon. It was just around the corner. So I mention this because sexuality is a major theme within this movie. Do not assume that the AIDS virus is a protagonist in this film. If this film had come out a year or later, yes. The introduction of homosexuality in the movies in 1980 was not new. Tennessee Williams, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Suddenly Last Summer, was introducing it on Broadway in the late 1950s and in the movies in 1960s. The Stonewall Rebellion was in 1969. But the difference with American Gigolo was this was a man for hire. And I argue still, a man who is giving off mixed signals, to me anyways, as a viewer and as a writer. I want to know more about it. I need more of an explanation than I'm not gay. And he says it several different times in varying degrees of ferocity. So it's very important for him to make us know that he is not gay, which makes us believe, doesn't it, that there might be something else going on. Paul Schrader wrote and directed this. The same year, he wrote Raging Bull. In 1976, he wrote Taxi Driver. Paul Schrader knows how to write a story. So when I get into my examination of the story, and I tell you that in my estimation, my personal opinion, my own take, the story fell off the tracks and this wonderful cast was wasted. I'm going to offer a supposition, a defense of Paul Schrader, and a glimpse into what I think might have happened. I saw it, I'm a junior in college, and hey, the music was great, and I was introduced to this guy who defined a term that would be later called metrosexuality to the 100th power. He knew how to dress, he had a cool apartment hotel, had a cool Mercedes coupe car, he was handsome, of course. And he had a job where he had a madam named Anna, played adroitly by an actress named Nina Van Pallant, I hope I pronounced her name correctly, who procured women that were, about twice his age. I'd say Julian, Richard Gere's character, was probably mid-20s, 30 tops. And his job would be to be an escort. To wherever, dinner, the museum, the opera, to be a chauffeur, a tour guide. And should the moment present itself, and the lady, these were all dignified, very wealthy ladies, want sexual services, he would provide them. That was his job. So I've followed Richard Gere's career over the decades and have been impressed by his catalog of work. And as the decades have ticked by and our understanding of sexual identity fluidity has come into focus, I often returned to this story and wanted to understand the character of Julian better with respect to sexual identity, because in this story, he moves very adroitly between the straight escort service and then the gay escort service. Because in addition to the character of Anna, who procures these ladies for Richard Gere, there's a wonderful African American actor named Bill Duke who plays this menacing, I'll call him a procurer as well, but really, he's described as more of a pimp, and his specialty, so to speak, is procuring within the gay community and the kink community. That's just the way it is. That's the movie. And Julian has worked for both of these procurers. Anna's a pimp. Yes, she's a female pimp, and Leon's a pimp. So let's just call them both pimps. So I haven't had an opportunity to see this movie much over the years, but it's really tapped me on the shoulder. And I watched it with the idea that Paul Schrader would tell me or give me some clue regarding Julian's sexuality, his fluidity, so to speak. And not only did I not get it, I was really only offered up a very crass explanation by Julian's character that he will not engage with gay men and he will not engage in kink. But it's put forth several times, and it's put forth with vigor, condescension, almost anger, like indignation. And that makes me even more curious, where, hey, I think something was left on the field with this character. So when we get into the script and we analyze it, you're going to be able to see that. And I know there was commentary by Richard Gere about when he went into this film, expecting that straight and gay lifestyle to meld together. I have to tell you, it didn't come across to me in a satisfactory fashion. So what's the story about? Julian's an escort. I already told you that. He's under the management of the pimp Anne. She's this beautiful Scandinavian woman that lives at the beach, and she's upset with Julian because he's become too independent. He wants too much of the take percentage-wise. But she's lined up this Swedish wealthy woman that's coming to town, and in addition to English, French, other language, he's learning Swedish. So as he's preparing for this Swedish woman to come into town, he's dating, some older women. And then he's asked to do a favor by the pimp Leon. The favor is, hey, I need you to go out to Palm Springs. It's a kinky gig.
Look, mister, someone's made a mistake here. I don't do couples either.
No, you don't understand. It's just my wife, Judy. Not me. Just her.
Okay.
But I can watch.
Of course.
We meet a guy named Mr. Ryman, played by Tom Stewart, and his wife is named Judy, and she's played by Patty Carr. It's Mr. Ryman's just this middle-aged dude, and, he's the characteristic guy that's got too much money and too much spare time on his hands, okay? Julian shows up in Palm Springs, goes in there, and there's this beautiful, voluptuous blonde woman. She's just barely coherent, but we see the talent that Julian has in his craft. It's about the romance. It's about the courting. It's about the conversation. It's about the gentle kisses. It's about the caress. It's about the touch. And that is what Julian's tradecraft is. That's why he commands the money that he does. Even though he's there to perform for Mr. Ryman, there's a sensitive interaction between the two. Paul Schrader does not force us to watch like directors today would to watch the act. It's not necessary. We leave Palm Springs. Now Julian meets Lauren Hutton, beautiful, plays this character Michelle. And she is the wife of a prominent politician. And she's alone in a restaurant. And she's sitting alone in a booth, and Julian's at the bar studying her, and he overhears her speaking French to the maitre d', and he approaches speaking French. And she presumes he's French, and that leads to she inviting him to sit down.
Why did you come on to me?
Like I said, I made a mistake. I heard you speaking French. Often in these big hotels, you run into women from foreign countries who may need a translator or a guide.
And they hire you.
Yes.
How many languages do you speak?
5 or 6.
Plus the international language.
It's very fascinating to watch because, again, Julian's tradecraft, his ability to relate to women. Julian is actually very evasive. And the less he gives, the more she wants it, to the point where she finally asks, what do I need to do just to insert the F-bomb? And it's fascinating. He basically gets up and says, that's not for me, and walks away. She shows up at Julian's apartment, and nobody goes to Julian's apartment. He does not do his business there, and tracks him down. And that starts this romance between the two of them. She's an unhappy wife, married to a very powerful man. So you can see the dramatic themes unfolding here. Meanwhile, we find out that Ryman's wife gets killed out in Palm Springs. And guess who the suspect is? And Julian needs an alibi. And this is where we're introduced to Hector Elizondo. He plays Detective Sunday, and he plays them with humor. He plays them with sincerity. It's just a wonderful performance.
How do you do it, Julian? This afternoon with Mrs. Jarvie, and tonight at the country club. How do you seduce all these women?
I don't like you poking around my private life Sunday. Bugging my friends. I'll tell you what. You lay off my clients, I'll give you a few pointers picking up women, okay?
How's that?
First, obviously, you dress lousy.
There's some humorous scenes. I actually think they like each other. And I actually feel that he actually would like to maybe live that life. So it's wonderful, wonderful character. So the hammer's coming down. Julian cannot account for this period of time from when he left Palm Springs, went to pick up another one of these ladies that Anna had set up for him, which was his alibi time. He goes to the house. Well, first of all, the detective says, listen, Mrs. So-and-so can only account for your time, Julian, up until X time. What about this time when the murder occurred? Julian, is really caught in this trap. He actually goes to the house of this woman in Los Angeles that hired him, and the husband's there, and says, listen, you got to account for my time. I was with you. And of course, they join forces, the husband and wife, and say, listen, we told the police our story, and that's it. And then Anna will not give him an alibi because she's done with him, because actually Julian missed that whole appointment with the Swedish client.
You trick for other people. You cheat me out of money. And then when you need a favor, you come back to me. If I help you, you'll have to help me.
How?
You'll have to come back to me. Work strictly for me.
And then he goes to Leon, and Leon says, yeah, I'll hook you up with an alibi. Don't worry about it. Well, what had actually happened was Leon operates out of this gay club, and we have a scene where Julian goes into it. He actually knows a lot of these characters. Hey, Julian, how you doing? He talks. He's very comfortable there. Again, back to my supposition, back to my curiosity about Julian, his defensiveness about, hey, I'm not gay. Leon says, yeah, I'll hook you up with an alibi. But in reality, what happened is that Leon's new, quote, boy, unquote, had gone out to Palm Springs. I think had a scene with the wife. I think it got too wild, used handcuffs. The wife died. And then there was some jewelry stolen. So Ryman, Mr. Ryman, now has a dead wife. He's involved to the extent that he procured a male prostitute. So the decision is made that Julian is going to become the fall guy.
40-60 split. It's fair, 40-60. 40... 30-70. Oh, I'll do kink. I'll do anything you want me to do.
Leave me alone and get out, Julie.
Why did you pick me?
Because you were frameable, Julie. You stepped on too many toes. Nobody cared about you. I never liked you much myself. Now get out.
There's a lot of pathos here in that Anna, has dropped Julian. He can't get an alibi out of her. Leon is going to nail Julian because Leon's boy actually did the murder. And they actually planted the jewelry on Julian's car. So he's all alone, except for Michelle.
I'm paying for Mr. K's defense because I know he's not guilty. And I don't want to see an obstruction of justice.
How do you know he's not guilty?
Because he was not in Palm Springs the night of the murder.
No?
No. He was with me.
Michelle, who is in love. And just to fast forward to the end of the story, Richard Gere is in that meeting room in jail, with the glass pane and the phones on both sides.
Why did you do it?
I had no choice. I love you.
My God, Michelle. It's taken me so long to come to you.
And then there's this music that it's like canned, I don't know, like a religious chorus music. It's like matinee music that comes out and plays during this thing, and then closing credits. Okay, so Jonathan, where are we with this? Remember, my quest was to see if I could get some idea about Julian's sexual identity that I may have missed when I've seen it in previous years. I'm armed with a new understanding of sexual fluidity. I did not get it. In fact, I got clubbed over the head with this, I am not gay, basically. I am not gay. He says it several times, and I do not do gay sex. So I guess that's our answer, although I remain very curious because I've described to you he can move in and out of that gay end of the spectrum. And the storyline, it's just your basic interesting boy meets unhappy housewife. Unhappy housewife is willing to throw her marriage to the powerful politician away out of love and saves the day. That's the story. You have this wonderful cast. You have Richard Gere in his prime, Lauren Hutton, beautiful in her prime, Hector Elizondo, Nina Van Pallant, Bill Duke, and others. They're just there waiting for the words. They're waiting for their characters just to be fleshed out more, and they will deliver. And the story wasn't provided to them. Well, I told you that the author, Paul Schrader, is a successful writer. He does not make mistakes. I believe there is a clue as to why this story, in my opinion, fell off the tracks, and that is in the original casting of Richard Gere. There were several very famous leading men who, for one reason and another, couldn't take the role. So it landed on Richard Gere's lap. Fortunately for us. And then there were some very famous leading ladies up for the character of Michelle. And some of them passed because they thought the story was unsavory. Paul Schrader, I think, given this time period, 1980, maybe given the pressure of Raging Bull being out, I think that the powers that lorded over this film told him to hold back. I think they dumbed it down. I'm not going to blame Paul Schrader. This story is just, it's not of his making. Some other external forces, and I point to the casting of the male lead and the female lead as potential evidence of what was going on. That's my personal supposition. Now, we're going to play script doctor. A script doctor is basically a screenwriter, usually a successful screenwriter. There was a guy named Robert Towne. He wrote Chinatown. He was known as a very famous script doctor. They're paid a lot of money to go in and fix a script. Oftentimes, they do not get credit. He was actually a script doctor on The Godfather. And Francis Coppola, although Robert Towne didn't get screen credit, gave him public acknowledgement when Francis won the Oscar for Best Picture. That is what a script doctor is. Now, we are going to play script doctor, and we're going to see if we can't fix this script. When I say fix it, I don't really mean fix it. I mean flush it out in a way that we can get more out of these wonderful actors. And there's no right or wrong answer. That's the thing. It can be whatever you want it to be. And in the end, I'm going to give you my take. Now, there's two ways to approach this. You can approach your fix from the viewpoint of 2024 sensibilities. That is fair. However, you can also approach it from the 1980s sensibility of sexual dynamics. And if you choose to do 1980, that is like an advanced placement course. And that is how I'm going to give you my take. So get ready. We're going to run through some possible alternatives. First of all, let's analyze the character of Richard Gere. How can we rewrite that character? What we have with Richard Gere, we know we have a self-avowed straight man who services older women, meets Lauren Hutton, and she decides to give him an alibi, and life goes on, everybody is happy. What if we were to change Richard Gere to a gay man who was working straight women, servicing straight women? Would that work for Michelle? And our conclusion, I contend not. It would not. I believe Michelle was looking for a straight man. However, we all know that in the world there are relationships and there are marriages between straight women and gay men, very successful marriages. And that's gone on for hundreds of years. So let me put that out there. In this particular case, it would not work. What if Richard Gere was a bi man working and servicing straight women? Would that work for Michelle? Probably. It would be more interesting. Michelle would have to make a decision. And the character of Richard Gere throughout this movie would have far more interesting encounters, would he not? I contend he would. Instead of the oil heiress from Texas in Los Angeles, what about the oil man, the oil baron who wanted a gay encounter? Would that not be interesting? I think it would be. So that would flesh out the character of Richard Gere, Julian, far greater than the existing script. Now let's flip it around. We talked about Richard Gere. What about Michelle? What could we do in rewriting Michelle? What if Michelle was bisexual or gay? In other words, she's unhappy with her marriage because she's not hetero, or her husband's not satisfying her because she has bi tendencies, or she's just a gay woman. Would that work for Julian? We don't know. I don't know. I think if Michelle, whether she be bi or gay, provided the same love that Michelle in the original script did, I think, particularly if we changed Julian's character to being gay or bi, might work for Julian. It might. So see what I'm doing? I'm just playing with Julian. I'm trying to flush him out more by changing his fluidity. I'm doing the same with Michelle. you can already see that, I hope you can see that those characters are becoming far more interesting than they were originally written. Now I'm going to give you my take. This is from 1980. I've got a script. It's on the desk. It's written. Jonathan, you're the script doctor. How are you going to fix this? Well, I'm going to leave Julian the same. I'm going to leave Michelle the same, even though I don't think those actors and actresses were really fleshed out and given the opportunity to really perform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the senator bi or gay. The senator. And maybe Julian encounters him in the gay club. Or maybe Julian actually has this senator as a client. So suddenly, Michelle and Julian have the necessary leverage on the senator to basically say, hey, we're going to expose your secret sex life. Unless you agree to an amicable divorce and you agree that you're going to provide Julian with the necessary alibi, boom, the story's done. That's the simplest, most cost-effective way, I believe, of fixing this script. Not changing Julian, not changing Michelle, but changing the senator. So I want to give you some closing observations about what was said during this movie. First of all, I told you that I set out to get answers to questions that I had about Julian's sexual identity. And not only did I not get the answers, I was able to see the script in a new light, and I found it personally unsatisfactory. I offered up as a script doctor and gave you the opportunity as script doctors to change the characters, to tweak them, either from a 2024 perspective or a 1980 perspective. I chose the 1980 perspective, and I took the path of least resistance. I left the script alone, and I basically just tweaked the senator, and everything came out the same. And I think my RX as a script doctor was more economic and might be accepted because it was less costly. I'll throw that out to you. But all of your attempts, if you attempted it, are valid. There's no right or wrong answer. And then something Julian says, which is very salient about his profession. And he says this to Anna. I'm getting older. I got to keep moving forward. And I've seen this in other movies or television shows where there was a gigolo, where age is a ticking time bomb. Actually, the movie Alfie, 1966, Michael Caine, Shelley Winters refers to Alfie. Alfie comes into Shelley Winters' apartment with whom he has an affair and finds her with a younger man. Shelley Winters basically says, Alfie, you're just older, my dear. By the way, when he does those gravity boot workouts in the living room where he's hanging upside down, don't try that at home. Not unless you're with a professional that's there to save you from killing yourself should you fall out of those. Wherever you go, please leave behind a soft footprint. And until we see you next time, class is dismissed.
And that opening from American Gigolo with Blondie's music pumping throughout, it's worth noting that Call Me, as evocative of the era as the movie was, ended up becoming the #1 song on Billboard for 1980. You've been listening to the Razors Inc. podcast with Jonathan Farini. Be sure to check out Jonathan's collection of fiction at the Jonathan B. Farini Story Collection at jonathanfarini.com. There you'll find everything from drama to romance, something for every reader. That's jonathanfarini.com, Farini with 2 R's, 1 N. Or drop an email to razorsincpodcast@gmail.com.